Hey everybody, this is The Flash, and I am here with...
This is Harley Quinn.
And together we are...
The
Wonder Twins!
Wonder Twin powers, activate! Shape of an eagle!
Form of water!
Hello Harley, how you doing?
Good, Flash. How are you?
I am doing great. Welcome back to 2016. Or wait a sec. Are we still in 1975? Is that disco music I hear in the background?
I sure hope not. I'd much rather be back in 2016.
Well, I guess you weren't around for the 70s, were you?
No, I wasn't.
I was a young buck during the 70s, so I quite remember all the bell-bottoms and big collared, open-chested t-shirts and stuff like that.
That's fantastic. My parents have some very interesting pictures from the 70s that are really fun to look at.
Well, that's pretty much what we're covering. So far, the show has been in the 70s.
That's true. Apparently next week we're going to time jump, though.
Anyway, hey everybody. Welcome to Legends of Tomorrow. We are covering episode 3. I am Flash.
And I'm Harley Quinn.
Just like you heard in our intro. And we are covering episode 3 entitled Blood Ties. Now this is our second unofficial Legends of Tomorrow podcast. We have a couple things we wanted to go over with everybody before we get to it. So, the first thing we wanted to mention is that this will be the last week that we are going to post anything on Arrow Squad or the Central City pages in Facebook, because those pages are solely dedicated for those specific shows and groups, and we don't want to interfere or take up space for those shows. So we do have our own page, the Cybercast page that you guys have all heard about, and we would love you to come there to interact with us about our shows and our podcast. It's exactly the same as if you were going to the Golden Spiral Media website to download or listen to Arrow Squad or Central City. You just go to Cybercast to listen to Legends of Tomorrow or any of our other Wonder Twins podcasts. So just please do your best to follow us on that, and that would be much appreciated. Then the other thing we want to talk about is there was some requests to get us up on iTunes, and me and Harley did look into that, so we're going to hopefully have it set up for next week's show. So that means this week right now is hopefully the last time we have to do it the way we're doing it, with the Cybercast page and through the links there. Which we'll continue to do anyway, but we're hoping to have the iTunes set up with our new Libsyn account and the RSS feed and all that kind of stuff that we're figuring out. We just got to get it set up with new accounts and everything. So hopefully next week we'll give you guys all the links and info for that, for the people that have been requesting to be able to add it to their podcast feeds or schedules, whatever it was. I don't even do that, so
You can use your favorite podcatcher.
There you go, podcatcher. Hey, I like that.
Yeah.
Now, and the other little piece of news, Harley, I'll let you announce what we want, our first little exciting thing that we want to hopefully get some people involved with us in.
Sure. So we are going to announce our first contest, and this was inspired by Kelly, so I want to make sure she gets some credit there.
Of course.
It is the Name the Podcast contest. And right now, since we're just kind of getting off the ground, we'd like to hear everybody's ideas about what you think we should name the show. I'm not going to lie, there's been a couple submissions already, and they're pretty good.
Yeah, and I'll throw in there right now the front, just to give you guys an idea and things to work with. Since this is a Legends of Tomorrow podcast, the front runner is Tomorrow's Legends. We're really liking that one, so it's up to you guys to come up with something to best that name.
Yeah, and for right now, our first prize offer is mostly bragging rights, our sincerely heartfelt thanks, and possibly maybe a guest host gig. I don't know. What do you think, Flash?
That I think is an awesome idea. We could have our first guest host to be on here with us and just sharing their thoughts and talking with us, kind of like we got to guest on Arrow Squad a couple times and be part of that show with our fearless leaders. So that's what we are looking to do, because hey, we're just starting out, and it's not like we have DVD sets of Legends of Tomorrow or anything to give away just yet. So
no, we don't, or really much of anything, because it's so new.
It is so new, but that, like we said in the beginning, that's what we want to get some feedback from you guys, and we want to find out who's listening to us, and we're hoping this is a way to break the ice, so to speak, to connect with us for the first time and help us name this podcast and help us get us off the ground. And then with that, we'll create a sort of an album cover, because we're going to need something, like we're going to need some artwork and whatever for the iTunes store and all that kind of stuff. So yeah.
Theme song.
So in order to submit your ideas for Name the Podcast, please, I will put up a link, or not a link, I will put up a note or post on the Cybercast Facebook page saying Name the Podcast, and on that post there is where you guys can comment and submit your entries, and we will pick one probably next week if we've got everything set up. We'll announce the winner.
Sounds good.
All right. So next we've got a little bit of listener feedback. Yes!
No, we actually had a bigger response than I was expecting.
Yeah.
This is really exciting.
It is great. And it's from, regular Arrow Squad and Central City members, so it's really cool that they're also listening to us and have some things. So the feedback is in regards to last week's episode, so we thought we would start with that before we get to this week's episode. Mm-hmm. And just talk about a couple of things. And we did just address the whole iTunes thing, because I know, what do we have? David, Kelly, and is that Davia?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, not sure if sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, but
I know. I don't know if she's called in before on other podcasts to hear her pronounce it. But...
Okay. So anyway, thanks to those three, they asked about the iTunes thing, so that's what we're looking into. And we have Kelly, aka the Master Wordsmith, who we know and love from our other groups. She let us know that she's enjoying the podcast, and she thinks that because Martin Stein is working on time travel, when we meet him in the Flash TV show, that's related to his experience we saw in Legends. So she wanted to know, is there time change or time continuity? Was it explained or maintained? So I actually went back and watched the Flash episode just the other day that it was from, and I should have taken note of which episode it was. I believe it was Flash episode...
I think she said 14?
Yeah, it was around the 14 mark. And yes, sure enough, Barry goes to Stein's house to see him, and Stein does talk about how he's been working on time travel theory for quite a few years, and explains to Barry how it is possible. So to me, it's very timeline continuity to connect the younger Stein, which we saw in last week's Legends, to when he saw all the future stuff, and they brought him on the ship and everything, and he got witness to everything that's going to be in the future. To me, that was a perfect, really, really good writing on their part to connect that to the Flash episode where we saw him talking about time travel and everything, and it was brilliant. So hopefully that answers your question, Kelly. That's where we first saw him talking about it, and they backtracked it to the Legends of Tomorrow episode when he was back in time. It was well done.
Yeah, it was very well done. I actually can't believe I forgot about that, because thinking back on season 1, that's probably one of the episodes I liked a little bit more, just because it talked about time travel.
Yeah.
I can't believe I didn't remember that, but that's a good catch, Kelly. Thank you.
Definitely. All right, and what was our next little bit of feedback?
So David wrote in, and he's also enjoying the podcast, and he had some very nice things to say. He says that we are fun, eloquent, and we bounce off each other well. So that was really exciting feedback to hear.
Harley, pass me the tea with a little bit of sugar, please. Eloquent. I have never been described as eloquent before. That was Awesome.
I know, that was really cool. So I feel like I'm not stuttering over my words as much anymore.
Yeah, now I'm going to be all self-conscious about listening to how I speak.
I know.
But thank you, David. That was really, really nice to hear from you about that. And then we had to have a little bit of a chuckle. Yogabon had sent in a message, and she was concerned about Heatwave not surviving the episode, and I could not for the life of me remember where she was getting that from, how she connected that, because I was pretty sure Heatwave was there at the end of the episode on the ship, and so I believe I commented on that, that I wasn't sure where she saw that from.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. The only thing I can think of is that I think he gets knocked out at some point in the episode, so maybe she didn't notice him like in the ending scene or something and thought he was dead from that. But
maybe
as far as I know, just Carter's dead.
Yeah, so far. And then the last little thing, it wasn't posted publicly, but our dear friend Green Butterfly, the eye in the sky, she sent me a private message saying she had a little bit of trouble to get our podcast, but she eventually figured out how to download it, and she sent me almost a in real time message saying that we are in her ears right at that moment, and she is a happy butterfly.
Yay! Hi, Justina.
Hello. So that was really cute and awesome, and I'm glad that she's enjoying it. So hopefully we'll hear from her and everybody else again.
Yes, I expect audio feedback from the Green Butterfly.
Audio feedback.
Yes, because she always has awesome points and awesome feedback. So
she does.
I want audio feedback.
Well, we have that. So we have to figure out how to make that. That's the one thing I haven't figured out yet, is how to make that a possibility for people, that they can send us messages.
She can email you a voice memo.
Ooh, did
or
you
she
hear that,
can
Green
record
Butterfly?
it on her computer and export it as like an MP4.
Okay, well there you go. Okay, so while I'm still trying to figure out this phone number possibility, let's do that then. If you guys want to send us a voice message, and I think you can do it in Facebook too. I think you can send a voice message through the Facebook Messenger as well, or...
Oh, can you really?
Like Carly just said, it's an email, voice message, or what else did you say?
Yeah, well that's actually... Well, I'm a Mac fan and a Mac user, and I have an iPhone as well, so it's actually super easy to do it from those platforms. So if you have an iPhone, you can just open it up and you can record a voice. It's called a voice memo. It's the voice memo app, and from there, I mean, it's super great quality if you've ever heard some of my feedback on the other podcasts, and it's just like the speakerphone of my iPhone. And so I just record it, and you can email it directly there. So I always email it to the feedback emails, and it goes through.
Sounds awesome, and that's what I do when I phone Aero Squad in Central City. I just have a voice recording app on my Android phone. I record my voice, and that allows me to yak on for the 8, 10, 12, or as Aero Squad likes to laugh at me now, 45-minute messages. I record it, and then I upload it to them. So yeah, you can easily do it that way too, and then email it to us. And we would love to hear it. We really appreciate that we have heard from a few of you, and we would just love to hear some more and actually get some voices, because then when you send us those clips, I will be able to actually play them back for you, just like we hear on Aero Squad at Central City, and kind of follow the way they do things. So yeah. Now one last point on, not quite on feedback, but something again I was saving Harley is, remember I told you that the audio hosting site that I use for our audio clips, it has a tracker to let me know how many people have tuned in. Well, guess how many downloaded or streamed our last week's episode?
20.
Not a bad guess. As of this afternoon, I checked at lunchtime, we had 53.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Wow.
So...
Where are these people coming from?
I don't know.
Seriously, email us.
Yes. I mean, we are over the moon. You can tell by our reactions right now. We're over the moon finding that out, that 53 people at least checked it out. Whether you listened to the end or not, who knows, but you still checked it out, and we would love to hear from you and find out who you all are and what you think, because that is awesome. That is just over double what our previous episodes have gotten. So
Yeah, the podcast overlord was not kidding about that silent majority.
exactly, yes,
That's amazing.
that is amazing. So there you go. All right, we were discussing last week that we wanted to make kind of a list of Flash and Arrow episodes that people can catch up on or look back to if they are confused about where all of these Legends of Tomorrow characters have come from. If they're brand new to the comic book genre TV shows and they have not watched Arrow and Flash, that these past episodes would be great. Parts of them are origin stories and parts of them are just introductions to the characters. So Harley, why don't you, since you did all the research, why don't you list those off for people if you got to get a pen and paper ready and jot down what Harley's about to tell you.
Yeah, or maybe we could post it in that Facebook group. Can we add like a note or a comment or something, and we can post this out on the Facebook group. But just to give like a quick rundown, and these are episodes that like I have picked out. So some of them kind of have coincided with the previously on that we saw at the beginning of this week's episode. But from The Flash, I would say to watch Season 1's Episode 10, which is Revenge of the Rogues, because that's the first time we see Captain Cold and Heatwave working together. It's not the first time we see Captain Cold, though. And then Season 1, Episode 13 was called The Nuclear Man, and that's the first time we're introduced to Firestorm, period. And it's also Ronnie Raymond who's Firestorm. And then the last one that I would say is quote-unquote mandatory, even though none of these are mandatory, but from Season 2, Episode 8, Legends of Today, which introduces the show Legends of Tomorrow. So it's Hawkman, Hawkgirl, and Vandal Savage, and it's very centric to the Legends of Tomorrow.
It was really the kickoff episode, yeah. It was.
Yeah.
It almost was a Legends of Tomorrow episode.
Yeah, it really was. And beware that is part 1, and part 2 is from Arrow. And I'll get to that one in a minute. But there's 2 bonus episodes, if you were interested, from Season 2, Episode 1 of The Flash, The Man Who Saved Central City. That's the disappearance of Ronnie Raymond. And I think we might briefly get introduced to Jax, but I'm not sure. That might be another episode.
Right.
And then Season 2, Episode 3 is Family of Rogues, and that is very Captain Cold-centric, and you learn more about his family and his father, which might be really interesting after watching this week's episode.
Yes, so. Yeah, because they tied that all together, so...
And then from Arrow, I've just got 3 episodes, and they're all from Season 4. Episode 3, Restoration, which is where Sarah Lance comes back from the dead. Season 4, Episode 6 is called Lost Souls, and that is, I think, where we are reintroduced to Ray, because we think he's been dead for a while.
Right.
They think Ray is dead on Arrow for probably I guess 6 episodes. They think.
So this is the episode where they find him again and essentially rescue him?
Yeah, it's where they rescue him from Damien Dark. And Sarah, you also can really see kind of the bloodlust come out in her in that episode, because she's part of the team and has trouble kind of controlling herself.
Right.
And then the last one is Episode 8, Legends of Yesterday, which is the continuation of Hawkman, Hawkgirl, and Vandal Savage. So that's like the second part of so it goes Legends of Today, Legends of Yesterday. I would watch those 2 last, honestly.
For sure, and that really, like we said, launches the Legends of Tomorrow TV show. And so, I mean, if the rest is too much for you to catch up on, then definitely watch those 2, and it'll really jumpstart the where a lot of it began from, and all of them coming together for the first time.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, thanks for that, Harley. I will make a post on the Facebook page with that list. So in case you guys can't remember it or didn't write it down, then you can check it out there.
Great.
Cool. Well, let's get into it. We are going to move on to Episode 3 of Legends of Tomorrow. Now, before we even get into all the details and everything, Harley, I want to point out right away that Episode 3 and this show is already finding its groove. And I'm guessing that because it is being produced and made by all the showrunners of Arrow and Flash, and they've got all that experience behind them. Because Flash also found its groove very early on, whereas Arrow took the entire first season. It wasn't until the second season of Arrow that it really found its way on
True.
TV. So you really noticed in this episode of Legends, it was more polished, it was intense, edge of your seat, it was well paced and well written. There was nothing hard to keep up with. There was time for the drama and the emotion to sink in, so you could actually feel it and connect to what was going on. And also, it was just plain old fun to watch. I mean, it's got sci-fi and time travel and spaceships and 70s disco music and rock and roll all mixed up, and yet it did not feel like it was too much this episode. It had such a wonderful pace, and things were settling in. Like I said, I think it's found its groove already. It's starting to settle in, and it's got a direction now.
Yeah, no, I agree. It definitely has more of a direction. I mean, not that it didn't have a direction, but like you said, it's the way they do that pacing, and then I think maybe a little bit the way they've like started to join into different like smaller teams almost of characters.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of cool because you get to see how they're interacting together. And I think that helps with the pacing. And so, like, even though they're trying to squeeze all of these character stories in, the way they went about it in this episode, it flowed better. It was easier to follow, and it didn't feel overwhelming. It didn't feel rushed, and it worked. And then they all came together in the end, and I liked that.
And we'll actually talk more about the character pair-ups and stuff later, too. But
yeah, we'll get into that a little bit more.
Right off the bat, they have previously on Legends of Tomorrow, and you're seeing clips from last week's episode or the last couple episodes, but yet they were showing clips from Flash and Arrow, which I found was kind of strange, because if you're not watching those shows, you're a brand new viewer to Legends, you're going to be looking at it going, wait a sec, did I miss something? I never saw that.
That's true. See, I didn't think of it from that perspective. I was like, oh, they're finally filling in the backstory. And by the way, some of those episodes I called out, because I did that research before I watched the show. Some of those clips do coincide, or some of the episodes, they coincide with those clips.
They come from the list that you provided?
They do.
Cool.
Not every single one, but, well, I listed more episodes than they showed clips from. But.
And then I'm going to start right off with because the episode is really, really good. So let's get the things that I nitpicked a little bit out of the way. I don't know if you have any. Yeah. Right off the bat, I thought it was funny when they go into the bank. This is supposed to be 1975, and they had computers in the bank. And if I'm not mistaken, I don't think we had computers that ingrained in our lifestyles yet in 1975. I don't remember there being computers back then. I don't think computer tech was up that much. I'm not sure. Maybe you can correct me, but I thought it was more like the 80s when computers really started becoming ingrained in everyday life at banks and all this. I don't know. The computer looked a little bit too new to me to be a 1975 style computer.
I am going to have to agree with you there. I guess I am technically not the right age to be commenting on this. Yeah. However, it is my understanding that, like, commercialized computers and personal computers, even if we're, like, in the working environment, really didn't become popular until the mid to late 80s. And I believe we owe it all to Apple and IBM. For all of that development. But yeah, I don't think in 1975 there were computers. And you know what's even more sad, Flash?
What's that?
Didn't even faze me. Didn't even notice it.
Didn't even notice.
Not at all. I didn't. It's because computers are so ingrained in my everyday life. I was like, oh, look, it's a cool retro computer. Didn't even think that it shouldn't be there in 1975.
And I guess I forget about that, Harley, that I got a few years on you, so you were born into the computer era, and it's just part of life for you, whereas I come from a time where there wasn't computers and phones had cords attached to the walls, and you couldn't, the whole fun thing was to get a phone handle receiver that had a 20-foot cord so you could walk a little farther away from it.
My phones had cords too when I was younger.
Oh, okay.
But
And even before I remember there wasn't even VCRs at a time. You had to be home. If you knew that your TV show Legends of Tomorrow was coming on at 7 o'clock on CBS, you had to be home at 7 o'clock to watch it. Otherwise, you missed it because there was no PVRs, there was no VCR recording, there was nothing. That's what I remember. So,
we were never very super savvy with the whole VCR recording. I'm not gonna lie, that was weird to get that to actually work and work correctly. And we weren't that tech savvy in my house. But
no.
I've had a DVR for so long at this point that I'm like, how did I function without this? What do you mean I can't download an episode on iTunes?
That is such a whole other topic to getting into the technology and society nowadays, because a whole other podcast. That could be a whole podcast. We'll talk about society and their technology and how they can't live without it, because that's what another TV show which I loved, Revolution.
Oh, I loved Revolution. I called in for that all the time.
Yeah, it was all about what would the world do without electricity and lose all of its electronics and all that kind of stuff.
I loved that show.
Yes. Okay, so back to Legends. Yes, you had made a point about there were some awesome quotes in this episode. Just great lines that are calling out to the rest of the DC universe. So why don't you read that one that I think was our favorite?
Yeah, I think the first one, that was my favorite, is I've seen Men of Steel die and Dark Knights fall. And I just absolutely loved that. I mean, to me, it was a clear shout out to the Death of Superman and the Dark Knight series by Frank Miller. Because I think it's book 4. It's entitled The Dark Knight Falls. I've not actually read them. I have read Death of Superman. I do own Death of Superman. It's one of the few comics I own, like in paper.
Yeah,
paper form.
Keep that thing for sure.
Yeah.
And that was Vandal Savage that said that, right?
No, that was Rip Hunter. He said it towards the beginning too.
That was right. That was Rip Hunter. Sorry,
Yeah, because he was trying to emphasize. This was when he was trying to convince them, because they figured out he didn't have a plan, and he's like, "You don't understand how bad this gets. I've seen Men of Steel die and Dark Knights fall." And so
beautiful.
That was really cool.
I mean, I didn't connect it to the comic books. I was just immediately, yes, Superman and Batman. He actually mentioned it.
I know.
That was great. It was so cool.
Super.
Now, what was the next one? You also had another quote down here you liked.
Oh yeah, that's right. I forgot about this one. This is another. I think this was another Rip Hunter quote. He was talking to Sarah, and he said, "We are all blessed and cursed with the drive to move forward." And he was talking about. She's like, "Well, how did I don't know how you moved on from the death of your wife and son, basically." And that was kind of his response. And I was like, that's really kind of true. Like at some point, regardless of how much you lose, like your survival instinct still kicks in.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
You don't have a choice. You have to move forward.
So Rip and Sarah, that kind of leads us into what I really want to talk about with this episode is and you had already mentioned, the character connections, how the entire team seemed to be broken off into smaller groupings and pairing up with each other, and I love that about this episode. It allowed us to spend a good 5-10 minutes with each group, like in total time, with each smaller group, to really see them starting to get to know each other and watch their relationships develop, and the connections between them developing, whether good or bad. We got to see that, and they paired up Sarah and Rip, and then it was Captain Cold and Heatwave with Jackson, and then Martin Stein and Ray Palmer. So what we wanted to talk about is we wanted to break that down into more, go into more detail about each grouping. So let's start with Rip and Sarah.
Yeah. Well, I kind of alluded to this first point with that. With that last quote that I was talking about. But Rip, he doesn't really have a plan, and I guess we kind of all should have seen that coming because he's definitely, it just seems, he's just out for revenge. And I think the flashback to Egypt really kind of highlighted that a lot. He hasn't thought through the execution. He hasn't thought through all of the potential issues, and he's bringing back originally 8 people with him to 1975 and doesn't think about, I'm lying to these people, I'm not essentially like coercing them to do what I want to do, and I'm going to drop them into 1975 and hope they don't screw it all up.
Yeah, and I kind of felt it just seems like he grabbed who he thought wasn't really important enough to the timeline and the rest of the world, and that they might not be missed. That's why it's such a misfit group.
Yeah, that's kind of weird to me. I mean, it makes sense. I mean, if you're going back in time, you want to take people that won't alter the timeline too much. So.
Well, by being not
guess.
important to the timeline, but
right.
at the same time, there are also people that don't really get what's going on, and they could very easily make mistakes, as we see, like Captain Cold. We'll get to him, but he's not too concerned about altering things and everything. So
no, in fact, that's like his whole purpose.
Yeah, but I mean, to continue with Rip and Sarah, I mean, their connection, you could see it starting to develop. He was kind of losing a bit of his way, and she had to kind of bring him back to earth. And then he had some advice for her when she was starting to, when the bloodlust was starting to take over. And you had made a point here that you were very glad they kind of allowed her to explain that to him, which also allowed it to explain to the viewers that maybe haven't watched Arrow what this bloodlust is and where it comes from.
Right, yeah. Because, I mean, to me, as a avid Arrow watcher, I knew exactly what was happening. But if people are new to the show, they're not going to have a clue. They're going to be like, why did she all of a sudden go crazy?
Yes.
Yeah.
So they did a good job with that, and they showed the two of them starting to build a relationship and a respect for each other. And really, they're in this. They don't have anybody else. They're in this together, and they have to find a way to support each other and back each other to be able to get out of it now.
Yeah, exactly.
So, but before we move on, that bank scene with when everything went to hell suddenly, and Sarah, she's just like, I got this, and man, did she rock that fight scene. That was better than we've seen her fight in all of the Arrow episodes she was in. She just took control of that room, and it was beautiful. That really showed her worth to the team as a hand-to-hand fighter and how much she can handle.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that was very cool. I really like that.
And the music too. They had some wicked 70s rock, whatever that was, going on. It just suited the scene perfectly. I loved it. It was a great scene.
Oh yeah, it was. This is a good soundtrack too. I liked it.
It was very much. So then we come to Ray Palmer and Dr. Stein, which I also really this may have been my favorite pairing of the episode.
Yeah.
There was some pretty heartstring tugging scenes with them developing their relationship and trying to get past their difference. I just found it very emotional, very dramatic, and the two actors, Victor Garber and Brandon Routh, just amazing acting. Love their scenes together. The stuff with him being the teacher, and Ray used to be one of his students, and he thinks Dr. Stein doesn't remember him, and Dr. Stein tricks him into thinking that he remembers him, but he really doesn't. Just that interaction between them to kind of raise each other up and build each other's confidence to be able to save Kendra. It was a phenomenal scenes. Yeah.
It was, yeah. It was really good. It was almost like our break a little bit, because everything that was going on with everybody else was a little bit more dramatic is not the right word, but action-packed kind of, I guess. There was a lot, especially Rip and Sarah's scenes. There was a lot going on in there.
Yeah.
So it was kind of nice to take a step back and like see the two characters, how they were interacting and how they're able to move past their differences, because I was like, they're not going to be able to string this out very long, because from the beginning, first couple episodes, it's really clear that, I just almost called him Brandon. Ray he's got like a chip on his shoulder because Stein does not remember him, but they're finally able to move past that. But
yeah.
So
sorry, go on.
No, I was just saying, like, I like seeing the different pairings. So I don't know if these little teams are gonna stay these little teams, or if we're going to see how everybody interacts with each other differently, like each week. Like maybe next week it'll be Sarah and Captain Cold or something going off.
I think so. I think they will. I think they'll continually mix it up to get all the characters building relationships with each other, and whether the good relationships are oil and water mixed relationships.
Yeah.
But I think they'll definitely do it. Well, the other thing I wanted to say with Ray and Dr. Stein, when they shrunk him down and he had to go into Kendra's bloodstream and stuff. I mean, you make a great point. Very fantastic voyage, and it's exactly what I thought about. And also, there was another classic movie from the '80s with Martin Short, where he shrinks down as well, and goes in. What was that one? I think it was Martin Short and oh boy, I can't remember the other actor. Wow. Okay, I'm gonna have to look that one up. But another old movie about the same idea.
Oh, I don't know. I keep wanting to say Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, but that's not Martin Short.
No, that's Rick Moranis. Yeah, this was Martin Short and Dennis Quaid, I believe.
Really?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to look that one up.
Whatever it is.
I can't remember the name. Anyway, when he did that and went in the body, it was fun. It was a really, really cool. I loved it. As he shrunk on the floor, and then you seen him kind of circle. He flies and circles around, and then goes into the tube to go into the needle to be injected. That was just special effects wise. That was so cool.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. I liked it. I mean, it definitely was. I mean, it just had a fantastic voyage feel to it.
It was awesome.
Made me kind of giggle a little bit. But...
Yeah, it was so cool. Yeah. All right, let's move on to the next pairing, or I should say threesome. We had Captain Cold, Heatwave, and Jackson.
Mm-hmm.
And what did you think of that?
When this whole thing started, I was almost like yelling at my TV because I thought for sure that stealing the diamond was going to screw up the timeline, and then it was going to have some catastrophic effect, and then they were going to have to go back and fix it all. And so the way everything they packed into this entire storyline was really dense, because it not only developed Captain Cold, we got a little bit more on his backstory, insight into him, and then insight into how they're treating time and how all of the timelines are ultimately changing or not changing. Mm-hmm. So, I have quite a few points here, but let's start with this first one specifically. I liked how, and because Martin did this in the last episode where they're confronting their past younger selves. Mm-hmm. I mean, this was a little different because he's meeting his 5-year-old self.
Yeah.
But he still speaks to him and says, gives him some words of wisdom, and we see a softer side to Captain Cold that we never see. And so I thought that was kind of cool. And then we see how, it takes time. I mean, they say, I wrote down this quote, so I'm just going to say it. But
okay.
It says, because it explains a whole lot of stuff. It says, it takes time for time to change. My dad was never Father of the Year, but he never raised a hand to any of us until he went to prison. And now he won't go to prison by him, quote unquote, stealing the diamond. That was the whole idea.
That was his plan, yeah.
Right. And so I guess despite that, his future remains unchanged. So we're like, okay, so I thought for sure this was going to screw stuff up, and I was like, oh man, how are they going to fix this? He's going to completely change everything. What's that going to do? And then nothing ever changed. He still goes to prison for a different reason, but he still goes to prison. And so that was kind of nice that it kind of tied back into the Flash theme too, because when Barry changes the timeline, there's certain things that can't be avoided and can't be changed no matter how much you change. It just happens in a different way. So time sort of catches up with you.
Yeah, and then just to add to that point, that's what I was saying I think it's similar to Flash's story when he tries to go back to save his mom. His mom being murdered is a fixed point in history, as it was explained by Dr. Wells. And that fixed point can't be changed because that already happened. These people are coming from the future back in time, and they can't alter something that happened. It's a fixed point. So that whatever that point is still has to happen. So with Captain Cold, it's his dad going to prison, which turns him into an abusive jerk. So no matter what way and an event that has to happen to force him to go to prison. So, okay, he didn't steal the jewel, but he later tries to sell it, which is the exact same thing, and he still goes to prison. And what I'm trying to say is, no matter what, it's a fixed point in time, and something is going to happen that makes him go to prison to become that jerk of a father, which abuses Captain Cold and his sister and turns them into the people that they are. That's something that can't change. So I think they're trying to stick to the same type of philosophy that they explained on The Flash in regards to time travel. And I know with all this time travel, timeline stuff, it's going to bring up tons of questions, and our listeners as well as us, we're gonna get confused. We're gonna have questions, but how did this happen? How does that connect to that? And it's going to be tough for us to keep track of it all. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if we want to try to start keeping a list of timeline changes and events or whatever. It just might be a little too much. So I'm wondering if the show is even worried about that, or if they really don't care. This is fun. We're going to play with time travel. We've already kind of established the basic rules that we are going to run the show by. Just come along for the ride and enjoy it, and don't try to rip it apart too much. And I think that's kind of the perspective I'm going to take, is we'll look at it and ask the questions and try to answer them, and if we don't, I'm not going to stress about it too much. Let's just enjoy it.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's a TV show, and time travel isn't real. So the rules are whatever they've established, and to me, they're taking more of like a fate, destiny approach. Mm-hmm. And so it's kind of like what has happened has to have happened, or what will happen, will happen. I mean, for the most part, that's been pretty true. So even though they've gone back and tried to change things, or not tried to change things, it's stuff. Certain things have to happen and certain things will never change. Like Captain Cold's dad, he still has to go to prison no matter what. You can't get around it. And kind of the same, I guess technically with Martin Stein, like he goes back and he leads himself to the ship and he becomes obsessed with time travel. Well, we see he was always obsessed with time travel. So that fits, that continuity makes sense. What does the parts where it starts to get a little weird is where the Martin Stein that comes back to the past comes back from the future. He doesn't remember seeing the spaceship, but so that was where it becomes almost a new origin story. And then you have this other piece where like Ray Palmer left his tech for Vandal Savage to discover, and then Central City gets destroyed in 2016. So that was an interesting. So they let that ripple carry through, but some of these other ripples, they're not like going anywhere.
And that's kind of what we brought up last week. That the Ray Palmer's bit of the suit falling off and leaving it for Vandal Savage to find. That's kind of more the butterfly effect.
Right.
Time travel story. So they could be mixing two of them. Yes, you can go back and you can't change things that have already happened. But you could introduce something new
into the equation,
to history, and that will affect things.
That makes sense.
So, like, say, as an example, say they go back to World War II time period, they can't go kill Hitler and affect the timeline that way. No matter what, Hitler is going to have to come into existence and do what he does, all that kind of stuff. But what they could do is introduce... Say they meet Hitler and Hitler sees something, say it's a piece of technology or whatever, and that enables Hitler to become more powerful. They could alter what Hitler does with it, and that would affect the future.
Yeah, he wins and takes over the world instead of defeating him.
So it brings back my point. You can't history that's already happened. They can't change, but they could introduce something new that could affect the future.
That makes sense. All right. That does, actually, a lot of sense. I like that.
And if anyone else listening, if they want to add to our theories and what our ideas coming up, because we're working through this, so come talk to us and let us hear what you've got to say about the
or poke holes in it.
Timeline. Exactly. All right, we want to talk a little bit about Vandal Savage. Were you asking if he is the leader of a cult?
I mean, that's what it looks like. I was like, well, this is an interesting twist.
Yeah.
I mean, it was very... I mean, that whole scene, I mean, there was a very ritualistic feel to it, so it felt pretty culty.
Well,
You know?
and this is what I think it's kind of a sign of the times. I mean, it was very easy for people in the 70s to follow whatever they felt was, cool and groovy to them.
Yeah.
I'm thinking along those lines a little bit, but they also, I mean, they worship him because you've got this guy that can live forever, and back in those times, it was kind of a good way to grow essentially a large force of devoted followers that won't question you. And I
Yeah,
mean, cults were a very big thing back then. There was a lot of cults, a lot of different groups coming into being back in the 70s, and I thought it was suitable because he probably, in the 60s or the 50s or the 40s or the 1800s, he probably had different ways of getting people to follow him. And I think just for the 70s, it was a sign of the times that he presents himself as this type of godlike leader, and people just worship him and follow him. And I mean, he used the drinking of Carter's blood kind of like a drug to.
yeah. I guess. I mean, that was fascinating, and I'm really into quotes. If you can't tell,
This is the quote episode.
I know. Well, if they have good quotes, I'm the one that's gonna write them down. So
All right.
he says.
Wait a second. That you just gave yourself, because what was your task
I
you put
know.
upon yourself from last week was all the time travel stuff,
Time
wasn't it?
travel. Yeah.
And now you're gonna follow quotes. All right. This
Okay.
job's gonna get easy for me.
It's gonna get easy, but yeah, I'll write down all the quotes. I'll deal with all the time travel, and
I'll
we'll
just
hear what's left.
Yep. I'll just say I loved how they talked to each other. It was wonderful.
Might get kind of boring for our
Yeah.
listeners. Anyway, we
Anyway.
digress. So the quote was, "I could share a taste with my faithful, help them to live an extra 100 years or so." It's like, well,
Mm.
that's fascinating information. So these people are not going to go away anytime soon, and they're probably, I guess, still with him in 2166.
Well, and I was wondering about that. So they took a sip of the blood. Does that mean they got immortality, that they can't die, or does that just mean it extended their life? Like it allowed, physiologically, it allowed their bodies to live a lot longer? That's what I wasn't sure yet. If
I think it
they
just
can now.
extends their life.
Yeah, I don't think they could, because it looked like Sarah and that it looked like they were cutting them down and killing them. I think they could still be killed,
Yeah,
but if they
yeah.
weren't touched, they would just live a longer life.
Right, yeah, exactly. It sounded like, I mean, he was basically just like extending their lifespan pretty much
Yeah, exactly.
by, since he was drinking the blood, I guess, which somehow is tied to Carter's life force.
Yeah.
So then he's sharing that with his followers, which helps extend their lives. So
I'll go with
it was
that.
creepy. It was
Well,
very cultish.
cult stuff is kind of creepy. They do a lot of weird stuff behind closed doors, and it is creepy. And
Yeah,
and the
drink that
one
fluid.
the one thing I thought was hilarious though was Heatwave giving a little shout out to the movie Eyes Wide Shut with Tom Cruise, and
Oh
that
yeah.
was just hilarious because that was right out of that movie, that whole cult type of thing. So it was just a funny
See, I
little
didn't see
joke he
that
cracked.
movie, so I found it very amusing that he made the reference, but I didn't quite get
You know
it.
why? Oh, well,
Yeah,
there
because
you
I haven't seen that movie.
go. All right, and now your other point about wondering that Kendra had to be the one to kill Vandal Savage because we saw Rip slowly cutting his throat.
Yeah, so I had just a whole series of questions on this whole scene,
Okay,
and
let's.
I am confused and am not sure that I like it. But I mean, so what? So we know it's been established that Kendra has to be the one to kill him. So,
In order for him to die, and that's it.
but
Like
die
he
like,
cannot come back.
but when Carter stabs him, he doesn't even die for a little bit. He just says, "Oh, haha, too bad." Pulls the knife out of his stomach, which he should have bled out in like a minute, and then turns around and kills Carter. But
Hmm.
when Rip stabs him, he manages to hold the knife in, and then he dies, but doesn't die because he'll obviously come back.
First thing, I don't think Rip stabs him. I thought Rip was slowly slitting his throat because he had him pinned up against whatever the pillar or whatever that was, with the knife at his throat, and I think he slowly slit his throat.
Oh, see, okay, I missed that. I thought he was like stabbing him very
Yeah.
similarly to what Carter did. Then like, okay, so Carter dies trying, but Rip can do it. Like that makes zero sense.
Yeah, well, maybe we can rewatch the scene, but maybe someone else can also help us there. Like, I think it was a slow slitting of the throat. That's why Savage was kind of gurgling and choking and trying to get his last few breaths out. But
that would make more sense.
I'll have to rewatch it to be 100% sure. I don't want to say you're wrong or anything, Harley. I think, but
no, that makes a lot more sense.
Right. But then also to try to answer, I don't know if Rip actually kills him because Vandal was saying, I will heal and I'll be back."
Yeah. So
okay, slit his throat. He bleeds a lot, kind of passes out, but then his life force, his immortality, will kind of heal his wounds. I guess Wolverine style or something. He'll heal up and essentially just kind of come back. So I guess it's just helping Rip feel better that he's now doing what he hesitated way back when in Egypt times. He hesitated to kill him, and this time he did it. So maybe that helps get him over that hump, even though he knows he can't be the one to kill Vandal Savage. He still is exacting his own revenge for his wife and son.
Yeah, and that makes sense, except for the fact that if he'd actually managed to do an ancient Egypt, this was before he was immortal, so he actually would have been dead.
He would have been dead, and then all this would never happen.
It would never have happened.
And then, I mean, from a show writing standpoint, too, if Rip was actually able to kill him, well, then the show's done, and what do we got? 3 episodes?
Well, details.
Details.
I mean, come on. I mean, I know the why, ultimately, but
then it also leads me, though, okay, talking about what we're talking about, if Rip can't kill him and he slits his throat and Vandal Savage now needs time to heal before he can kind of come back to full life and be okay again, and they know that, why would they not bring his body back to the ship so that Kendra can get off of the medical table and stab him and finish him off? Why wouldn't they do that?
I thought the same thing, but to your point, that then we wouldn't have 16 episodes to go through.
There you go. That's...
So there's the answer. Common sense loses in TV.
So there's going to be a few things we can nitpick on, but that's...
Yeah, these were my nitpicks. I thought about bringing him up in the beginning, but I was like, I'll just wait until we get into this character because it's very specific to the character. So, but
yes, very true.
I did have kind of another thought, and I thought this was interesting. Okay. So, because this is technically for Vandal Savage before he kills Rip's family. So, do you think now that he knows who this guy is, that he remembers, and that's why he kills his family in the future? I mean, yes. It would fit continuity-wise.
Yes, because earlier in the episode, when Savage and Rip were talking, Savage was like, "Who are you? What's your name? Who are you?"
Know who he was.
Yeah, and he's like, "Have I done something to you? Have I hurt somebody? Killed someone you loved or done something to you?" So he doesn't know yet. And then when he finds out later and he grabs the necklace, he opens it up, he sees the picture of the wife and daughter, and Rip says, "This is for..."
And he took it.
Yeah, he took it, and Rip says, "This is for my wife and Jonas," and then Vandal Savage says, "Ah, now I know their names. Jonas, I'll remember that, Jonas." And then that calls you back to the pilot episode. And remember, we talked about this in the first 5 minutes. Vandal Savage kills the woman and then looks like he's going to save the boy, and he asks what the boy's name. The boy says, "I'm Jonas." And then he's like, "Jonas? Aha." Pulls out the gun, blam, blam.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that connected everything. So this was essentially the origin of Vandal Savage finding out who Rip family is, knowing that he does kill them sometime in the future. So it takes to whatever year that was, Vandal Savage, to finally find them, and when he does and realizes who it is, he kills them because that's what he basically promised Rip he was going to do.
Yeah. Yep. Okay.
Make sense?
And that's what I was thinking, but I was like, is there enough in there? And then now that we're talking about it, yeah, there's totally enough in there. That makes like perfect sense to me.
Good. And this is great. Like, I love how we're only 3 episodes in, and yet they've already connected events that we saw in the beginning to now, so we're making connections on how all those events are going on. So I hope they can keep up with that, because if they start posing all of these little story beginnings, hopefully we get the bookend to it, and we get to see the finishing of it as well.
Yeah, that would be nice.
Well, do we got anything else that we want to talk about? We've kind of covered everything we've got in our notes here.
Yeah, I can't think of anything else. I mean, we hit on all the major like storylines more or less. I mean, I think we pretty well got it. We hit on the big stuff.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's tie it all up then. I think looking back on this episode as a whole, I think it was definitely the best episode so far, and I can see this show, as I started with, really finding its groove now, and it's about to settle in and get really, really interesting and intense.
Yeah.
And I am happy with where they're going with it now.
Yeah, I am too. It's kind of got a better flow. They've found their rhythm, and it's good that they found it early. But, you know, like you said, they've got a lot of experience, so I think that helps.
Yes, exactly. So. All right, well, this was a good show, a good episode, and it was fun being back here with you, Harley, for our official, unofficial second episode.
Yay! It's always fun.
Just to remind everybody, our contact information, you can get a hold of us via our new email, and that is cybercastfan@gmail.com. And cyber is spelt like short for Siberian Tiger, so SIBER, castfan@gmail.com. We also now have a new Twitter account. It is nice. Yes. I have not really done anything with it yet, but I will start posting to it. Our new Twitter handle is @Cybercast. So you can also tweet to us, or definitely please follow us and stuff like that. And again, the Facebook page, Cybercast, a fan-made podcast, is where you will find all of our Legends of Tomorrow podcasts and talkings and posts, and you'll also find the Wonder Twins stuff that we do all right there.
One-stop shop.
One-stop shop. So, thanks again for tuning in with us, and we would love to hear from some of you out there, just like you have begun, so thanks for those of you who did, and let's get some feedback, please. That would be great to hear from people.
Yes. Send audio.
Send audio. That way we can play it back and listen to your wonderful voices and then play it back for the rest of the world to hear. Unless you don't want us to. You can also say that, and we'll just keep it private to ourselves.
I guess we'll read emails too.
I'm just kidding. I guess.
Yes, please email, Facebook comments. There's a million ways to get in touch with us. Or 5, but you know.
1 million or 5. So all right, well, until someone comes up with a cool name for our podcast contest, this is still the unofficial Legends of Tomorrow by your hosts, the Wonder Twins. I am Flash, signing off.
And this is Harley Quinn. I'm out.